Welcome to another edition of the Haas Hopcast. I'm Micah, Cawley, hanging out with Barbara Stone, my colleague from the West Coast. Hi, Barbara.
Good morning, Micah.
What are you up to today?
Well, I'm on the road traveling. We should almost have some sort of interactive virtual map to figure out where all of us are at in our department at any one given day. I think it would be pretty surprising the amount of mileage we cover, but it's an extra chilly hotel room at 66 degrees, so I'm enjoying the air conditioning and excited to have our friends on the Hopcast with us.
Well, we pull out the map. We're going from North Carolina to California. So we've got Ryan Dunnie from Oscar Blues and Nick Pavlina. Did I say that right, Nick?
You got it. Yep.
From Humble C. Just one C. Sometimes
Just one
it's always
C.
like, yeah, exactly. So
Yep.
Welcome, guys.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having us.
So Ryan, we've met a few times, hung out. Nick's new to the show, kind of fairly new to Haas, and got a new brewery operation. But Ryan, you've been doing Oscar Blues and CANarchy for a while now?
Yeah. I joined on Oscar Blues back in 2014, and so I was here through the whole transition into CANarchy, and role just kind of grew with the company, and it's a fun place to be. I can't say it any better than that. You know, we just afforded so many opportunities, get to work with folks like you, and exciting stuff.
Yeah, and you're VP of Operations, and you have kind of 4 big areas that you oversee. Is that right?
That's right. Yes, we have 8 production facilities. I oversee 4 of them. There's the 2 Oscar Blues in Longmont, Colorado, and Brevard, North Carolina. That's where I am now. And then a Cigar City in Tampa, and then Perrin Brewing up in Michigan near Grand Rapids.
Yeah, very cool. Keeping you busy. Have you been traveling or trying to get back to some of those places to get on site now that things are opening back up?
You know, it never really stopped for me. I was one of the weary travelers that was basically in a hazmat suit for a few months, but yeah, we were, you know, it was all out of sheer necessity. I mean, we had to pivot so hard last year during the pandemic, and what we were producing and how we were producing it, and it was certainly challenging. But I think now that things are opening back up, we're seeing such a shift, and drafts coming back online. It's exciting times. I think people are really excited to be out and drinking beer again.
Well, we appreciate you braving it all to keep us all with some cold, fresh beer year-round all the time.
That's
awesome.
Right. People didn't stop drinking beer.
Thank goodness for that, right? Right, Nick?
That's right. Oh, yeah.
So is the rumor true that you started with a 1 barrel in your grandmother-in-law's basement, or is that just folklore or something from the website?
Yeah, that's pretty true. Humble Sea kind of started as my homebrew projects about 13 years ago, and then kind of slowly morphed over the years. And we got our first license brewing at my grandmother-in-law's garage back in 2016. So we bought a little 1 barrel system, brewed beer on that for about a year before we got our Swift Street, West Side Santa Cruz location up and running. We opened our tap room in 2017, so just celebrated our 4-year anniversary. And then just recently opened a second tap room in Pacifica, just outside of San Francisco last week.
Congratulations.
Yeah, we're cruising. Yeah, thank you.
What size brew house do you guys have on the big system? You went from a 1 barrel to a
10, which is pretty undersized at this point, but we're brewing 3 to 4 turns 5 days a week, so pumping out a lot of beer on that little system.
Keeping you busy. You got some fun beer releases coming up too. I was checking out. It's like, is this a Harry Potter themed beer, like the Harry Fogger and the Foglet of Fire? What's going on with this?
Yeah, that's we pump out multiple new beers every week, which is one of the reasons why I'm here to talk about all the fun products we use and all the experimentation that we do with all of our hoppy beers. But yeah, the Harry Potter thing is kind of a theme that's been going with our triple IPAs that have been very popular and successful, where we use a lot of these hop products in. But people love them, so we just keep making them.
Yeah, look forward to exploring that more with you and chatting about what kind of stuff you're using. If you hang out with anybody from Haas, you'll hear, especially Virgil, our innovations brewmaster, flavor with efficiency, which sounds like a marketing term, but as Ryan, I was thinking, with all the plants that you have to run, it really is important to squeeze out as much liquid at the end of the process as you can. And we all love hops, and we all know that, you know, fresh hops, whole leaf hops can add their own contributions, but T90 pellets, and you get into things like LupoMAX, which we're talking about today, are highly concentrated, I guess, efficient pellet, flavor and efficiency, all that stuff. But Ryan, talk about LupoMAX a little bit, maybe on a larger production scale, and how it's helped benefit you guys at the CANarchy operation.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. I mean, it's certainly a product like LupoMAX, and as we started delving more into that one in particular, it's I think you mentioned efficiency, and that's a driving force for us when we get up to the production scale. Translating something from those small systems where you've got the flavor that you want into a 300 barrel batch of beer, not having to be in the exact same every time. Obviously, you face a lot of challenges with yield and consistency, both the process and then finished product. So the ones that come to mind right off the bat is you're using less material. So I think it's, we always we drive for synergy, we drive for complexity, right? I mean, if I've got a can of Guayabera behind me, it's a Citra Pale Ale, so single hop beer that's dry hopped in the quantities that beers typically are now. You run a lot of risk of overpowering one note or having a very singular focused beer. But I think with a lot of these products, the depth of aroma and flavor is such that if you can find ways to extract a little bit of everything in the right balance, then you can put something that's very challenging to the palate, very complex, even in a relatively, and I say that with great care, relatively simple recipe. So what it's afforded us is a way to work with both T90 pellets and some of the LupoMAX products where the vegetative matter is removed. We can drive up the aroma without having to continually add more and more and more hops to the beer. And I think it not only adds that complexity, but it smooths out the product. Obviously, we're shipping less material around to get it done. Our equipment that we use for dry hopping isn't overloaded. We're not having to load a bell 3, 4, 5 times. You're cutting that down, and you're cutting down your circulation time all across the board. It's a very powerful tool to drive, like I said, drive that complexity, but also balance the time and the input and the effort it takes to make it, so you can be more and more consistent.
Yeah, consistency. When you make that, consistency is that big point to me when you make a product over and over again, which is sometimes hard or challenging and depends on the alpha or the inputs. Like everything, there's all these variables that you're trying to get to have that same outcome and that same complexity, and maybe even extend things like shelf life or keep the beer as fresh as possible by doing things like LupoMAX or other products that may help out with that. So it's fascinating to me what you guys do and how you get it done. And like you said, trying to not overload your dry hopping equipment or stuff, but you still want a flavor impact. And it's not saying T90 is not going to give you that, but as you're trying to dial in a process, I would assume this has probably shown some value to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I mean, it's I do want to touch on stability, because you brought that up just now, and I think that's something that we always. It's a never-ending project for us to extend our shelf life, and especially with these heavily dry hop beers. When you're talking about long recirculation times and sometimes multiple addition points, hot side, cold side, and otherwise. All of those are they're quote unquote pinch points, right? There are opportunities to pick up oxygen. There are opportunities to destabilize your foam because you're recirculating, running through a pump for an extended period of time. The opportunities for product loss. So all of those are points where we pay great attention to. And I think with a product like LupoMAX, where we're reducing the overall input for the same result, you're cutting down the number of times you're having to add something, right? So you're cutting down the time you have to recirculate a beer to get full extraction and saturation and tank turnover, we call it. And I think these are all important points. And before we jumped on this podcast, we were talking about variety packs and the flexibility they have to have in operations now. Going through the pandemic for us was a big challenge because we had to really pivot into those mix packs and opportunities for people to kind of have those sampler opportunities with a lot of our more innovative products, where we can sprinkle them in with the tried and true, the Guayabers and the High Lives and the Dales of the world. So an added complexity when you go to start making all those mix packs is, well, you're having to double and sometimes triple handle something, right? You're packaging it into loose, you're storing that, you're pulling it back out, you're loading it into a mix pack, and you might be shipping it between facilities and then out to wholesalers. So obviously, keeping the product as fresh as possible when you're inevitably adding a couple of weeks of time to the overall process to get it out the door is of the utmost importance for us. And that's what these sort of products give us a little leg up on, I would say.
Yeah, as the industry's evolved, and folks like yourself, Nick, you started in 2015, opening tap rooms. You've got a beer coming out every week. That's no easy task in itself. Before I jump into kind of how you're using LupoMAX or playing with that, I want to hear how you kind of build out a beer, what your process is for putting hops and things together, and what that looks like on a scale of when you got a triple IPA with 10-2, that's got to have quite a few hops. And talk to us about kind of your ethos and what you got going on there at Humble Seed.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I mean, a lot of the points Ryan hit on, except obviously the fact we're not making 300 barrel batches. Our largest batch size is 40 barrels. So we have a lot more. We kind of approach these alternative hop products more as experimental in kind of quality rather than efficiency. As we grow, we're looking more and more into the efficiency benefits of these products, but that wasn't the real reason why we kind of dove into them. We approach our hoppy beers basically just trying to get the most unique saturation flavors that we possibly can. And we've been doing experimentations consistently over the past 4 or 5 years. But yeah, I mean, coming up with 3 to 4 new hoppy beer recipes every week is definitely something that's pretty challenging. So going back to products that we know where we're going to get the consistent, flavors from LupoMAX, we know exactly what we're going to get kind of every time. So pairing that with what's worked, kind of trial and error, with what haven't worked, we select pretty much the majority of our hops used in any of our hoppy beers. We select probably 20 different varieties. So that's been a huge game changer for us the past couple of years in getting the consistent flavors, all the key flavors that we know that we want out of each variety specific. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that I kind of struggle with every week is coming up with new recipes, but it's also one of the reasons why I got into it, is the creative side and playing around with things. So that's kind of the general overview of how we approach.
No, I think you have plenty of options, at least. So we almost have too many in the hop world, where it's like there's so many new varieties and you're finding time to explore them. But trying to figure out which ones play well together or not. Are there any hops for you, Nick, that when you tasted this hop for the first time in a beer, you were just like, wow, I've got to put this in a recipe? Or is there anything that stood out to you as these aroma varieties have been coming out from all over the place? The public breeding program, the HBC, ADHA, all these folks.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's plenty that have stuck out. I think one of the ones I can think of was, I don't know, probably close to 10 years ago when kind of Nelson was coming out, and I used it in almost like a Helles lager type of beer. And I was just absolutely blown away by the final product. And then I just started using that in hoppy beers like nonstop. And then over the years to see it, gain popularity was pretty cool for obvious reasons. And then, there's obviously new experimental varieties, Nectaron out of New Zealand recently has kind of blown me away a little bit. Excited to dig into that a little bit more. We got to select ours this past harvest, so I'm excited to get that first shipment coming here soon. But yeah, it's crazy to see. It's almost hard to keep up with all the new varieties coming out, so it's fun, but it's challenging for sure.
Oh yes, I was gonna ask you, Ryan, too, hearing Nick talk about these beers that change every week, have you guys seen on a larger scale kind of consumer demand shift? Obviously Dale's is a staple and something that's gonna be around and is an incredible beer. Have you seen the market demand kind of shift and change for different styles, or are things?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, obviously we've gone through the wave of hazy IPAs and heavily dry hopped. We're pushing up into 3-4 pounds per barrel. We don't go typically too much higher than that. I mean, again, depending on the application, but I think that what we're always looking for is synergy, right? I mean, in beers of that nature, it's ironically akin to brewing, a Helles or a lager, where you're really driving very subtle nuances and very delicate, intricate flavor differences. Because there's, how many IPAs are there out in the world, right? And how many beers have Galaxy and Citra or any of these very popular hops in some combination and in some balance with each other. So finding ways to pull out all the positive and the desirable attributes that you want while minimizing the negative is, I think it's a huge challenge. And then translating that into large scale production is inherently is going to require some subtle little tweaks and turns along the way. So for us, it's how do we balance what's become, to your point, an extensive hop inventory, and be able to use them all and pick and choose and balance how much we're using, but then also how much we're going to continue using of any one as the new stuff comes out and things change year to year. Dale's is a staple, sure, but it's also it's not the same hops as it was even 5 years ago. It's just like, again, subtle tweaks as things go along and as we evolve with the changing nature of any of one of these particular varieties, but then also learning how they play together and what we can do to, like I said, maximize all those positives. It's a blast. It's exhausting. It's a challenge, but it's certainly why I like coming to work every day.
Oh, absolutely.
I have a quick question, Micah, if it's okay. Ryan and Nick, you both have mentioned that you really appreciate being able to select your hops, and that's what has made an impact in your beers over time. What are the challenges of selection? I've been at a brewery and participated in the selection process and seen the fluctuation from crop year to crop year, even though we selected as a team and come back and forth. One of the benefits of LupoMAX is sort of a guaranteed variety sort of specificity from crop year to crop year. But I'm wondering, can both of you touch point a little bit on the challenges you've seen, even though hops have been selected from year to year for your brewery? What have you seen through that process for yourselves?
Sure. I'll go first. I think hop selection takes experience first and foremost, because what you smell on the table, what you smell out of a cut it's not a direct one-to-one. This is what it's going to do in a beer, right? I mean, it takes that knowing how we're going to use them, what's the desired from the hops that we smell fresh on the table, like I said, to after they've been processed and pelletized or turned into a product like LupoMAX. So with any kind of with any sensory focused endeavor like that, you have to. It's always a challenge to remove bias, right? And especially when we have a very extensive repertoire of styles and beers and flavor profiles, and some of them use there are a lot of kind of common thread hops that run through a lot of our different beers, so they might be used in different ways. They might be driving to capture different things. So I'd say it's coming to the table with an open mind, knowing what you want out of a hop, but also being open to saying, I haven't smelled this before. I don't know exactly what it's going to do. Can we get some of that in a cut, or can we blend to blend in a little bit of that, add a little bit of complexity? If you come to the table too attached to one particular attribute that you're looking for, sometimes you can overlook what's going to drive some of those subtle changes and those subtle complexities that really has to be the core of innovation.
Yeah, good point. Nick, your thoughts on selection? Kind of Barbara's question.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is obviously it being a sensory evaluation, and everybody has different sensory palettes, and that's kind of a hard thing, especially newer brewers that are on your team that might not have been exposed to a lot of the hops you've used over the years and not know exactly what we like to use. That can be a little challenging in kind of trying to nail down certain terpenes and aromas that you're looking for each variety, knowing from experience how the end result is going to be. We have kind of one core IPA that we make all the time, Socks and Sandals, and it's kind of a West Coast hazy beer. It uses Chinook, Centennial, Simcoe, but it uses massive amounts of Citra as well. And I know kind of how all those hops work together at this point and how I want that end result to be. So this past year specifically, when it was kind of all virtual selection, all the samples got sent to the brewery. So we had like our whole brew team, involved in the selection process, when normally I would just take up a couple people to Yakima. So kind of specifically laying out, hey, so Centennial, what I look for is more orange blossom, less kind piney, dank. I like that to play off more of a pineapple forward Simcoe rather than a dank. All these flavors are what I look for in our Socks and Sandals, because that's what I've noticed over the years and that's what I want. So kind of getting the whole team on board with exactly what we're looking for each variety, I think is super important. And then obviously, unbiased decisions, taking good notes and obviously sharing and going through reasons why you like certain ones, reasons why you don't. And yeah, that's kind of our process.
As the crop years and changeovers have happened, have you guys had to come up with creative blends to make a hop work in your recipe that might have arrived differently or turned out differently in a beer than you thought it would on the selection table?
Yeah, actually, Cashmere for us this past year didn't quite turn out what we thought. Our selected Cashmere in 2019 was like one of my favorite hops that we used. And then the stuff we selected for 2020 wasn't really coming out in the finished product like we wanted to. So I've kind of had to re-engineer using that hop. I don't use it as kind of a late dry hop anymore. I use it more on the hot side. And that just to me kind of brings out different flavor attributes that I'm looking for out of Cashmere. But it was something that I didn't really foresee happening until some of our finished beers started coming out. Like, oh, what is that kind of flavor? It's coming from the Cashmere every time. So we just started tweaking things and realizing that's what we had to do to make it work.
It's actually funny you say that, because the Cashmere variety in LupoMAX is the one people is one of the ones people are gravitating to quite quickly, because it seems like so many hop growers out there are still very unfamiliar with how to grow and treat cashmere in the farm. And there seems to be a varying degree of the cashmere out on the market right now, and having that concentrated pellet in LupoMAX that's a guaranteed specific variety, aroma, and profile is something that people are quite drawn to right now, to say, oh, you guys can reproduce the same cashmere year after year. That has a huge value to people. So that's interesting. That's the feedback I've been hearing from customers in regards to cashmere too. Ryan, have you guys had to get creative some of your selection outcomes and how to use them in the brewery?
Oh yeah, all the time. I mean, there's stories akin to what Nick said, where you're swapping out one variety for another, or maybe pushing something to the hot side over the cold side based on less than desirable attributes that kind of rear their heads. We've seen that southern hemisphere hops in particular. It's evolving, but there are years past where the variability year to year was rather extreme. I think some of the interesting stuff we've seen though is hop creep potential, as we have a lot more beers that are active dry hops, and we're actually chasing some of that, the evolution that you see when you do dry hop a beer when it's actively fermenting. While there's a lot of research that says you can't pinpoint one variety or another as having greater enzymatic potential, you can certainly do that, determine what you're dealing with within your own inventory, right? And bench scale experiments, and then even just real life, like this. If we've had a beer in the past that would just creep uncontrollably, and what we figured out at the time, again through those single hop bench scale or even one barrel trials, is that the Amarillo was the smoking gun. So pulling that out of the dry hop, throwing that one into the whirlpool, and replacing it with a pair of hops that we thought would do the same thing, and that would contribute an equal amount of precursors, I should say, is what we were driving for at the time. It's allowed us to drive more balance and be more predictable with some of those beers and fermentations. So while that's not necessarily something you determine on the table at selection, you are certainly looking always for opportunities to kind of build in some redundancy in case you do have to make those pivots, right? If you're chasing certain citrus aromas from a Centennial, it's fresh in my head because Nick brought it up. You probably want to look at some Comet as well, something along those lines. And again, just building in those. I don't want to call them safety nets. Really, it's more just about building in flexibility. Because there are so many hops out there, and so if you can get to a point where you can bob and weave and kind of roll with the punches as flavor profiles develop, or as unforeseen things happen, or particular lots. Barbara, you can speak to this. Smells a little smoky, then you can pivot and you can still capture a lot of those same profiles with a direct substitute or even just a blend of other hops.
You guys bring up some fascinating points, and I appreciate the candor and the insights on how you're dealing with things on a real life basis, and for other folks that are listening, what they've probably had some of the same problems or challenges that they have to pivot on, because you can like an early, mid, or late harvest hop, and you're going for maybe a certain flavor outcome, and as Nick said, you might want more pineapple, someone might want more dank for their outcome, but you got to have a product or a pellet or something at the end of the day that's going to deliver that into the process, whether that's LupoMAX or T90 or whatever it is. Alpha too, I've seen this as folks are looking at lots, they love a certain lot, but the alpha's low, the aroma's incredible, so now you're going to be throwing more hops if it's got a lower alpha, and so a LupoMAX or incognito type products can help solve some of these problems of reducing that vegetation, giving you the consistent alpha, consistent oil and flavor outcome. But as Barbara mentioned, each one's going to be a little bit different. I was fascinated by, have you guys dry hop with Columbus at all, or did you see we had Columbus LupoMAX out? What do you think about that, or is this something that like a best kept secret in the brewing world, or?
I don't personally use a ton of Columbus. I didn't even know Columbus LupoMAX was a thing, but might have to try that. But yeah, Columbus is kind of I don't know. I like to use it in certain West Coast IPAs, kind of a dry hop gearing towards a kind of classic dank profile. That's when I typically use it, but I don't use it very often.
Yeah, we've got some cores that have Columbus on the hot side. It's been a while since we've dry hopped with it, but that being said, there are times when we want to revamp an old recipe. I mean, Deviant Dale's the double IPA we made years back, and it's gone the way of pseudo extinction at this point. But there's always, you get a little Instagram hashtag bring back Deviant or the like. So my ears are perked. It'd be fun to try to bring Columbus back into the world of dry hops without having to battle all the onion, garlic, and typical negatives that will come along with a dry hop Columbus beer.
Now, Micah, you let the cat out of the bag. I have some customers that are wanting all of that Columbus LupoMAX. So I think that's the key, right? Especially some of the breweries that don't use enough of it to select. They don't want the marinara spices and aromas if they want to dry hop with it. And since Columbus is usually farmed for the alpha, that's what a lot is available out on the market. So it's the people that have been seeking it out are loving it. I'm going to have to tell them to get their orders in now. Thanks, Micah.
That's okay. No, it's just when I tasted the beers blind here that Virgil had, I was surprised that the dry hop was Columbus because of the flavor. And as Barbara mentioned, like cashmere or any of these hops that we have, it's very important, the processing part of this equation, as you have selection, all these inputs, and then what you get delivered to you for experimentation or fun. I wanted to ask you, Nick, about Sabro. You've had Sabro, your experience playing with that. What do you think about that hop? What do you know about that hop?
I personally like it a lot, but unfortunately a lot of our fan base doesn't. So I've had a hard time kind of using it. So I usually, it can be, as most people know, a pretty intense hop by itself. So I tend to kind of sprinkle it in on a second dry hop just for like those kind of nuanced coconut fruity vibes that it throws off. And we've selected our Sabro the last couple of years. And like I said, I've really liked it, but seems to be a flavor that, people either love or hate.
Well, you mentioned Nelson and Ahelas, and Virgil did Sabro Lager, and it's got this key lime, which we'll talk about, and you'll be able to taste at some point. But it's it's just playing with different yeast, different styles, different hops, and seeing what flavor outcomes you can get. But I did not think it was Sabro. I was like, what is this key lime pie deal?
Wow.
I'll have some more of that, please. So
That's
just
awesome.
something fun to think about.
Yeah,
Ryan, have you
definitely.
played with Sabro at all, or?
Oh yeah. I'm a big fan. I think that Nick made a good point. It can be rather powerful. So in combination with other hops, we'll drop the relative ratio pretty low compared to what we might with another hop of the same nature. But actually, Barbara, we had an adventure with Sabro trying to get it down to Mexico when I did that collab with Loba down in Guadalajara, and that was another interesting application for us. It has that, you mentioned key lime. It's got some kind of coconut character to it. I mean, it's the depth of aroma and flavor is pretty interesting. So we made it was a kind of a dessert beer. We started with it was a relatively dark base, some chocolate malts, a little bit of roasted. I'm trying to remember what else. A bunch of Lima peel, which is, I guess, combo lime and lemon. The fresh fruits you get down in Mexico it's a whole different world for brewing. It was really fun. We used some zapote negro, which is kind of like this, I don't know, it's almost like a persimmon, but it's like jet black on the inside when it's ripe, and it's got this kind of pseudo chocolatey, fruity character. We put all that in, and then dry hopped it with Sabro. And so it was almost like this kind of coconut cake, citrusy, very interesting beer that came out.
I'm sold.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to go get a cake and a beer now. It's only like 10:30 in the morning.
Yeah, and we used it on a small batch for another kind of pseudo dessert beer we collaborated with a coffee roaster here in town, and so it was also similar. It was dark base, but we dry hopped it with coffee beans, fresh roasted coffee beans, as well as Sabro. It had some lactose in it, so it was like this kind of chocolate coffee cake, coconutty, very interesting. I don't know if you call it an IPA or not. I mean, it's dry hops, but we didn't really. I think that's those hops like Sabro, where you have the opportunity to really kind of get weird with it. I think is where you learn a lot about like the potential of some of these products.
Out of curiosity, since innovation is so huge on both of your tongues today, the hops out there in the industry, we've talked about a couple of them that have sort of brought some consistency and some new opportunities to the table, like Cashmere and Columbus. If you could pick a couple of hops that you wish could be made into the LupoMAX out there that you would like to see, what would they be?
Well, Nick,
Yeah.
what do you got in mind?
Yeah. I mean, is this just kind of any hop, Southern Hemisphere, Northern Hemisphere, whatever?
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be cool to see some of the Southern Hemisphere hops, you know, Nelson or Riwaka, even Nectron, I think would be pretty awesome.
Dunnie?
I did write this down, Nick. I did write this down.
Yeah, Nelson was one of the first came to mind for me, or Big Secret. You know, those are hops where we chased very particular characteristics out of them, but it battled some of the negatives. So Big Secret Nelson is the Southern Hemisphere. Heck, even something like Centennial, you know, where it's kind of the variability of Centennial year to year has been a challenge. Especially when you're trying to apply it in dry hops, and so even some of the classic hops like that, if you were able to pull out some of if you're not pull out, I guess that's a little simplified, but you know, if you're able to pull out some of those negatives and know exactly what you're going to get, then you can start to weave that back into some of these as West Coast style IPAs or West Coast hazies are starting to become more and more popular. Could be an application there too.
Well, you had brought up Amarillo as well. Like Amarillo LupoMAX seems to be very consistent and true to type from that flavor standpoint. And it's all these hops that you're trying to, you know, we start with Citra Mosaic and a lot of these because they are the volume drivers of the industry right now. But what you're brainstorming here about what hops need to get into the whirlpool in a more efficient fashion, whether that's Incognito or LupoMAX or even working our way to the cold side for different things. It's like, what percentage of the hops are you replacing? What kind of impact can you get? These all factors that all weigh. Nick, do you have, I was fascinated by Ryan's Mexico story with Sabro and the crazy beer that came out of that. Do you have the craziest beer that you've come up with at your place where you got a little wild with it?
That uses hops, or because we've made a lot of weird beers.
Just one that comes to your mind where you're like, this was a fun beer. I enjoyed making it. I had trouble smuggling ingredients into Santa Cruz.
I mean, I think the smoothie beers that we're making are probably the most far out in terms of kind of wild ingredients and processes. You know, just doing stuff that I never really thought I would be doing as a brewer, you know, which is fine. We don't make a ton of them, but I think they're probably the most unique beers that we make.
Fair enough. All right, if I were to catch you guys on the weekend, it's been brought up before, like Desert Island beer, but to me, like weekend beer, what's something that you guys like a consistent go-to for you after a long day at work where you're like, I'm going to go open my fridge or I'm going to go to the tap room and have this beer? What is that beer for you guys?
It's a great question.
Nick loves all his babies. He loves all his children.
Yeah. I mean, I think if it's a macro lager and I just don't care, probably like a Pacifico or the Corona Familiar, the one in amber glass. But if I'm drinking craft or something similar, it'd be probably a German pale lager of some sort. Ellis Pilsner.
Nice. Dunnie?
Yeah, I mean, out of our portfolio, it's good. It is and always will be Pinner for me. And we actually, we were able to bring that back in one of those mix packs last year, which is to the everlasting joy of all of our employees because they get their shift year of choice back. It's we have as a lot of brews have, we've kind of leaned into rotating series, which I'm always a fan of. So Cannabis IPA is one of the Oscar Blues, and I'm kind of looking at potential for this in Florida Man with the Cigar City line is kind of revamping it seasonally. And that doesn't mean that it's necessarily seasonally focused, but you're essentially you're close to the same beer every time, but it is changing throughout the year. And that to me is really interesting because again, it's similar base, if not the same base, and you're just looking at different hop combinations and what that can do. So that's fun for me to keep the palate fresh. I like Nick. I've mowed my share of lawns, and I've had my share of lawnmower beers. I'll spare you how low I've stooped for now.
No, it's not low. It's just refreshing, right? It's like harvest. It's like harvest at Sports Center when you get a Rainier or
That's
whatever's
right.
available. Sometimes I
Yeah.
run out of beers. Surprisingly, I guess brewers drink a lot of beers at harvest. So
That's
whatever
right.
I can get my hands on.
I grew up in Texas, so it was always, Lone Star was what I grew up with. That's the Rainier of Texas, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so we're actually dipping a toe in the water with the low-cal, low-carb lager. It's called Oscar's Lager, and it's our play on it, and that's been a really fun one to develop because hitting those carb and calorie levels and actually having the beer retain flavor and any sort of complexity and color is it's enlivened kind of you get your artisan brewing and then you've got your engineer brewing. It's more of the engineer brew, I would say, but it's been fun. It's been a good learning process, and I'm really happy with it now. So at least now I can have my lawnmower beers with an immense amount of pride instead of putting a koozie on it and pretending it's something else.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair. Even some of these, we have German LupoMAX now with Ariana, Callista, Melon, and Satz. And it's like when you get some of these lower alphas and you're trying to squeeze out that flavor in those styles, you want to have a little bit higher alpha. And oh my gosh, looks like the lights went out here. It's mysterious. It's at my cue to wrap up.
Actually, that's interesting. What about that'd be an interesting LupoMAX's Saphir.
Okay.
Here we go.
Barbara and I are just going to put these in the innovation pipeline for R&D and be like, here's a list. You guys want to work on these today? But no, love where you're going. Love your input on this and what's happening here. Any closing comments for anybody out there listening to us? Any shout outs you want to give to your family? Like, hi mom, I'm on TV, or?
I think I owe Barbara a dad joke.
Do you have one?
You do. Yes, you do.
On the spot.
Can I throw it over to Nick to close up while I think of something?
Oh, I love it.
Hello. I mean, I don't really have anything besides thanks for inviting me to this. It's cool, and I'm looking forward to visiting you guys in Yakima this year and continuing the ongoing innovation quest.
Well, next time I'm in Santa Cruz, I saw pictures of your tap room and looks like a beautiful spot to drink, and love your theme, love your styles, love what you guys are doing. So we look forward to visiting you when it's not September and trying some of these. Is it socks and sandals or what's the?
Yeah, that's kind of our go-to. Yeah, core IPA. Yep.
Yeah, look forward to checking it out. And Ryan, your kids.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
No, I just said your kid's old enough now where she's going to start to understand the dad jokes here soon. So,
well, unfortunately, yeah, for her. All right, I think I got one. You know why hops get embarrassed when you remove their vegetative matter?
Ooh,
Oh,
why?
no, a hop one.
They've got nothing to cover their lupo cracks.
Oh man.
All right,
Right, I think, did you just make that up? That's amazing.
it's a curse. It's a curse, by the way.
Yeah, that was impressive.
That was a blessing, Dunnie. That is like, if there's no better way to end the Hopcast than that. I appreciate you guys coming on, and you guys rock. Look forward to seeing you in September and hanging out throughout the year. So keep up the great work.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
I'd love to crack a beer with all of you in person, and look forward to that being a real thing here in a few months.
Consider it done.